Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Alrighty. Welcome back, everyone. And today we're going to talk about show of authority stops, what they are, and why they are illegal. Now, this is one of the things that I love about it because I get to show you what they don't want you to know. Now, when a scar, let me slow down a little bit. Because the whole point of the night is to actually, since I'm still up, because I took a nap earlier, is to actually make sure you understand when we're looking at this and we're putting these things together, I'm giving you this information for a reason. And running through it isn't going to help you. Actually doesn't allow me to look very good giving it to you for the most part. So let me take a step back. Slow down, and I'm going to give you this information accurately and also where you can actually grasp it. So, let's get into it. Because when a squad car slides in behind you and flood lights bleach your rear view mirror, sometimes I get carried away. Anyway, when officer tone goes from hey to don't move, then 3 badges fan out around you on a sidewalk. None of these are conversational or casual. In constitutional law, we call this a show of authority stop. It's the moment the government tries to control your body and your movement without ever laying a hand on you. Now, here's the rule. Boiled down under the 4th Amendment, a seizure happens when officers use physical force or, remember one of the biggest words in law, when they make a show of authority stop and you submit. Remember, you have to participate in this stop. And they also attempt to use the non-participation as a pretext for being disorderly or obstruction. And again, there are also ways to get around that too, because if they're using it for obstruction, it also is a violation. But we're going to get into that. The Supreme Court in California v. Hardy, 1991, if you don't submit, it's not yet a seizure, legally speaking, until they actually touch you or restrain you. But the second you comply with an authoritative command, stop, hands on the hood, stay where you are, the Constitution is engaged. Understand that. They tell you, sit on the curb, and you don't sit down. You are not part of the seizure in that context. However, if you sit down, you are now part of the Constitution. Here's the better part of it. I'm going to do an entire video on what makes a police officer's orders lawful, because it amazes me that either they are complete liars or they don't know. Because the amount of police officers I hear, well, I gave you a lawful order. No, you didn't, because you can't. Because give you the pretext of it, police officer has zero authority until there's a crime. So they can't give you orders absent a crime. So if they're giving you orders, there's no crime, or they got to figure it out, it is a show of authority stop, and it's illegal because the orders are not lawful, because a servant cannot give a master orders. They don't have authority until there's a crime. So therefore, they can't give you a lawful order until there's a crime, unless you submit. Now, I'm going to get into that. But why does that matter? Because every time you are seized, there must be a point of reasonability. For brief stops, the government needs specificity, articulable facts that create reasonable suspicion. You ready for the rest of it? Of a crime. I'm gonna read that one more time because again, I do have police officers that watch these. For brief stops, the government needs specificity and articulable facts that create reasonable suspicion of a crime, not just a suspicious person. Because even if it is a call, that caller must give more than a description. They must actually articulate the crime they are calling about. This is where the police get caught up because they're revenue generators. They're not actual officers of law, which is why most of them don't know law. It's difficult to learn 7 years of stuff in 6 weeks. Trust me, I've tried. Anyway, and just like I told you before, this comes from Terry v. Ohio, and most officers have no clue, even though they'll spit this out at first. You're talking about a Terry stop, and you have no idea what's in the Terry stop. Most of them have no idea what's in their oath. Most of them have no idea what's in the Constitution. You know why? Because they're not reading the things they're signing, and they're only following orders because Jordan v. City of New England. They're not intelligent people. I can say this till I'm blue in the face, which is why a lot of the stuff I give you guys sounds foreign, because most people have no idea what they have and what they can and can't do. And that's why we're getting stuck into these places, not knowing how to actually apply the law that we are trying to live in and uphold. But anyway, Terry, Ohio. And the court is also tells us how to tell a voluntary encounter from a seizure. Rather, a reasonable person would feel the ability to leave or the freedom to leave. Now, the United States v. Mendenhall refined that Florida v. Bostic and United States v. Drayton at Breland v. California. Passengers are seized during traffic stops, and now you see the battlefield. Police routinely escalate consensual encounters into seizures by the lights, tone, numbers, command, and positioning. Because remember, in Terryville, Ohio, said if police are not careful, they can turn the detention or detainment into an arrest. Why? By the lights, by their tone, by the number, by the commands, and by positioning. Because if they're flanking you, they have now restricted your movement, and they must have an articulable crime. If not, that detention is illegal. Yes, I paused for dramatic effect, not because I was stumbling over my words. But now I'm going to give you something. I'll give you a sharp definition of a show of authority stop and why they are unlawful when unsupported. The unsupport will be absent of crime. Concrete street level defenses that do and don't work, and what to say prior to an arrest. Now, this is because most people can't not say something. So that's why I wrote these in there. And the courtroom playbook for suppression, dismissal, and civil remedies after arrest. Because a show of authority stop is clearly established. Why? Because the police officers will admit they have been taught Terryville, Ohio, And where's the show of authority stop come from? And if you actually been listening to any of the video or go back in my earlier video, I spoke about Terryville, Ohio, and show of authority stop, clearly established. Now, we'll arm this with the Supreme Court cases. Heidi, Terry, Mendenhall, Bostic, Drayton, Berlin, Brown v. Texas, Wren v. United States, Rodriguez v. United States, Helen v. North Carolina, Kansas v. Glover, Torres v. Madrid, and federal court statutes including 42 U.S.C. 1983 for civil suits and 18 U.S.C. 241, 242 for criminal civil rights enforcement. Now, the only one I haven't done a video on is Torres v. Madrid. Literally the only one. However, I've mentioned it several times in several podcasts. So if you go listen to the Supreme Decision Legal Minute podcast on all your major podcasting platforms, and I do believe it's an Arizona case that I spoke about when Torres v. Madrid first started showing up in your listening portions of this. But everything else has its own either podcast and video or its own video. And because these cases are the ones that set precedent and also supported different stages of seizures, different portions of travel, different portions of things that allow you to easily enforce the things that are being done to you and for you. Now, if you remember nothing else, remember this. Authority alone is not a license. A badge must be backed by facts. When it isn't, your liberty is not a suggestion, it's a right. This is how I win cases. So, the definition of a show of authority stop. A show of authority stop occurs when officers communicate by words, lights, siren, tone, numbers, weapons displayed, and or positioning that you are not free to leave and you submit. They display their weapon because here's the thing. I actually did a video where I spoke about aggravated assault. I had a young man confront me about it in the store one day, and because in it I spoke about how police commit aggravated assaults, and they do it purposely because, again, this is a psychological game, not a game about law. So he goes, well, that's not, if a police officer is doing it through the course of his job, blah, 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 blah. And I laughed at because I said, you're talking to me about the video. He goes, yes. I said, did you listen for the definition? He said, yeah, I heard. I said, okay. How does that not apply to a police officer when part of the definition is pulling out or pointing a weapon at someone to cause anxiety? I said an officer pulls a weapon out and begins screaming at someone. How is that not an intentional attempt to cause anxiety? He couldn't answer that because that's literally the whole purpose of them pulling out a gun, other than the fact to show cowardice. Because I watched something today, and it was the most freeing thing, because I'm going to do actually some videos on it, because it's watching the police officers get tased, and then watching videos where they tase someone and they're giving these people, while being tased, commands. Yet when they were being tased to get their certification, they had people holding them because, one, you can't move when you're being tased. Your entire body locks up and freezes. So when you tasing someone and that electricity is going through their body, they don't have the ability to put their hands behind their back or stop resisting. So they're using it as a pretext to actually inflict pain on people. Just let that sink in. But anyway, When we talk about the case of Hudari, 1991, seizure requires physical force or submission to authority, which would be those empty ass commands which they believe offers them authority because they have a badge, not because of the actual law, which is making it illegal and showing their level of incompetence, which is grounds for them to lose qualified immunity when you're not in one of the 9 states. See how all that just tied together right there? Anyway, Mendenhall asked whether a reasonable person would have a feeling to be free to leave. Bostic, on a bus or confined space, the question becomes whether a reasonable person would be free to decline or terminate the encounter. So that goes beyond the free to leave. Do you believe you can terminate the encounter? Now, if you're attempting to walk away and they're walking with you, that is a seizure because they are attempting to restrict your locomotion. And if they don't have a crime, it is illegal. This actually goes into the context as well as when an officer sticks their foot in your door and you did not invite them in and they didn't have a warrant. They don't have exigent circumstances, and if they don't leave, they are now liable to you for their actions. And this is the beautiful part of where you go after their post certifications as well as suing them in their individual capacity and take their pension. Because that is the one thing they fight the hardest to keep, their pension. You want to keep the certifications? Great. I need what's in the bank for you. I need that bank account. But this offers you that. Why? Because the show of authority stops and acts going against everything that they do because they don't know how to perform the job properly because you can't learn this in 6 weeks. Now, Drayton, 2002, officers need not say you're free to go, but coercive factors still convert contact into seizures. Because again, what did I talk about? The numbers, the flanking, the other ideas that you're believing that you can't move. This is not free will anymore. And in Breland, everyone in a lawfully stopped car is seized. The key word in that sentence is lawfully stopped. Because again, challenge everything. This is what I'm talking about because these words have meaning whether they want to give them to them or not. They have meaning. Now, give you the common police conduct that signals a show of authority stop. Now, I want you to understand something. I'm going to give you some terminology over the next month or so in which police officers use their words, again, psychological triggers that offer you the ability to incriminate yourself. Let's use that. Now, emergency lights or sirens when they're directed at you because, again, they're designed to coerce. The command, stop, hands up, don't move, stay over here, keep your hands on the wheel, keep your hands out your pocket. These are things that are commands. And if you follow them, you are now seized. That does not make them lawful. Because I actually just give you a quick story. And I've given this story a couple times. An officer told me one to sit on the ground. And I was like, dude, I don't sit down on the ground. He said, well, I'm giving you a lawful command. I said, great. What makes that command lawful? I said, because you can't tell me it's that dumbass badge. And he sat there because he did not know what he did was unlawful. He was befuddled. He was vexed. He was confused. Because I told him, I said, you do understand, giving me a command, if I follow it, you are now subject to a lawsuit. because you haven't articulated a crime. And he got quiet. And when the supervisor came there, I still hadn't given my name at the point. Supervisor came there, and whenever I started talking to the supervisor was like, all right, yeah, we're going to wrap this up. I got back in the car and left. Never gave him my ID, never gave him the socials, never gave him the birthday, didn't give him the registration to the car, because whatever they got from running the tag is what they got. And at the end of the day, it also helped them to stop pulling me over. Because that understanding, I'm not that regular dude that you pull over and just have your way with, because I understand how the game works and I understand how the pieces move. And I move them to be the most effective at it. And this is why we're doing this. Because we're understanding the simplicity of the complex. And the only reason it's complex is because we haven't broken it down to the simple. And even this, giving commands to someone without a crime is a show of authority stop. Yelling out, turn on your emergency lights, absent a crime, is a show of authority stop. An offer surrounding an exit or surrounding a vehicle, or blocking your path in any way, that is a show of authority stop. Now, here's a great one too. Let's say they stop you for a traffic infraction, and while they're talking to you, they don't give you back your ID. That is a show of authority stop. Now they display their weapons. Get the F out the car. Or they're yelling at you. They have an elevated tone. Coupled with questions that put you in an accusatory state. That is a show of authority stop. Because what they're doing is attempting to display something they don't yet have. And if you submit, you are then part of this game they're playing. And I actually love to hear, well, we're not going to play this game. I apologize, but you initiated the contact. You had discretion not to even talk to me. You made the choice. You initiated the game. Welcome to it. Because I am a game master. Let's go. This is the whole point. Now, even when they're using the spotlights, because one thing I love is when they're conducting or prior to conducting a DUI stop, what they will do, they have flashlights. Written on the flashlight says, do not shine in the eyes of humans. It says it on the flashlight. Wish I was joking. They generally get the flashlight and run it by your eye. Why? Because now it dilates your pupils. Makes your eyes water. And then well, your eyes are kind of watery. Your pupils are down. Are you on anything? No matter how you answer that, except, is that a question? If they say, well, yeah. Due to the Fifth Amendment and the advice of counsel, I choose not to answer this or any other questions. You have my ID, go ahead and write the ticket, and I'll be on my way. Now, anything beyond that, they must actually place in their police report so you can then challenge it. Well, I have to do this. Great. Put in your police report and make sure you note it. Because if you do it and you have no proof of it, I'm going to sue you in your individual capacity. Hence, why I told you I had counsel. And then watch how they move differently. Because officers need reasonable suspicion of a crime to seize you. Without it, the seizure is illegal, and the fruits, which will be the evidence or statements of the poisonous tree, are subject to suppression under MAP and Wong Song v. United States. Other videos I've done. Now, why show of authority stops are illegal? They have no reasonable suspicion. Terry v. Ohio, Brown v. Texas. Got a couple videos on Terry v. Ohio. I think I have like 3 on Brown v. Texas. Terry authorizes brief stops only with specificity and articulable facts of criminal activity. If they don't have, because I love the fact, well, you're a suspicious person of what crime? Because stopping me absent of a crime is illegal. And here's the next part. Don't just leave it on the table. Go tap those pockets. Make sure it is noted. Because here, I'm going to give you another one. Just kind of a little gem. Just like if you watch my previous video, one of the things I said, I'm leaving breadcrumbs. Because now anything after that becomes retaliatory and you can be compensated for it. Period. This is something now gives you strength to actually go to the Police Officers Standards and Training Commission and take their post certifications. Because again, you have already laid out the fact that this officer has already done something corrupt in the first beginning. It's always about the written record. That's why the pen is mightier than the sword. This is why you use this, not even sparingly, but just like I gave this story once of the officer, and I told him, I was like, I really didn't feel like going through anything. And we were talking, it was real casual. And he comes back and he writes me a ticket, and I close my eyes and I shake my head. He goes, well, what's the matter? I said, because now I have to sue you. He goes, what do you mean? I said, because if I allow you to get away with it, you'll think what you're doing is okay. And here's the even greater part. I sued him. He settled really quick. And he actually shook my hand in front of the court building with my wife and kids there. Because he honestly didn't know. He was just following rules because he had a quota. And just so happened, I was one of the last people he stopped to meet his quota. And that got him sued. And he thought it was okay. He thought what he was doing was right. And these are the things that allow these police officers to keep doing, because we don't push back properly. Now, Brown v. Texas, 1979. Detaining someone without reasonable suspicion of a crime violates the Fourth Amendment. Oh, you're a suspicious person. That detainment is illegal. Absent a crime, they have no authority. And the mere presence in a high crime area is not enough. They need actual articulable specificity of a crime. If not, it's illegal. Not my words. Terry v. Ohio, Brown v. Texas. Now, you may not, I had one gentleman tell me, oh, well, that's not in there. Well, then you're not reading the case in its entirety. You're not reading the decision in its entirety. Hold on. Now, here's one of the ones which get in their way. Wren v. United States, 1996. Allow pretextual traffic stops if an officer has a valid objective basis, the actual traffic infraction, but absent the objective basis, a flashing light stop is an unlawful seizure. Say that one more time. They're just pulling you over and they can't tell you why they're pulling you over, which is why they must tell you why they're pulling you over. It is illegal. It's a show of authority stop. Oh my goodness, man. But those, see, this is what happens when you live in the desert. You run in and out the house, go from 99 degrees to 75, and then you go back out to 99 degrees and go back to 75, and then when it's cool at night, you go put your feet in the pool for an hour, and then come back into an air-conditioned apartment. Yeah, this is getting crazy. Anyway, this is illegal, or as Rand put it, an unlawful seizure. Now, the mistake of law and facts. Heen and Glover. Heen, a reasonable mistake of law can support reasonable suspicion, and narrow, officer's mistake must be objectively reasonable, because again, they still must have specificity and a crime that they can articulate. Well, he was a suspicious person. Of what? What made him suspicious? What act was he doing that was suspicious? Now, if it's an act after the fact that they've stopped him, they are now, because I actually love using this word, targeted. Hell, if you actually was here whenever I did the other video, I used the word targeted. Because in law, targeted means exactly what targeted means. They're cherry picking. Because even in the context of when you're doing this, you're expecting a certain thing in a certain area. When you don't run into that, that's when the problem arises. Because using targeted, it means they were fixated on you even though there was no crime, which becomes an illegal act. Which again, words have power. Words have meaning. And Kansas v. Glover, 2020, it can be reasonable to suspect the registered owner with a suspended license if is driving the car unless contrary factors are apparent. Now, this is one that is beautiful. Because again, they're saying that police officers can pull up behind you. They can use their plate readers. And let's say the plate reader comes back, the one who the car is registered to has a warrant. And a young man used this, I want to say about 2 or 3 months ago. The registered owner was his mom. She's a 5'2", I want to say Hispanic woman. Well, he's 6'1". He's dark skinned. And while his mother's Hispanic, his dad isn't. So when the cops pull him over, he asks, what are you pulling me over for? Say, oh, because the registered owner of this vehicle has a warrant. He goes, oh, that's my mom. Officer literally looked him in his face and said, well, I don't know that. Said, you can't tell Mary whatever is a woman? So he asked the young man what his name was. He told him his name. He said, does that match the warrant? He then asked him to get out the car and put him in handcuffs and then attempted to tow the car until his supervisor came. Now, was he able to sue that police officer? Let's just say that case is in federal court right now because that officer overstepped and he knowingly subjected an innocent person to felonious conditions without cause. Because again, in order to get them to do the job properly, you must make sure when they don't do it, you are the one that is chastising them. Because I'm gonna give you a great one because I grew up in a different time. When I would go down the street, if I acted up down the street, the adult that's down the street spanked my behind before I got back to my house. And then when I got back to my house, they were there to inform my father I had been down the street misbehaving and they had spanked me. Guess what I got again? Another spanking. Sometimes you got to spank somebody else's kid because I even tell people, don't bring your kids to my house if I can't spank them. You don't want me spanking your kids, don't bring them to my house. Because in my house, I'm the president, I'm the emperor, I'm the king. This is a dictatorship over here. But understand this. I'm going to make sure that child has everything they need. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to play with nobody else's kids. So here's one of those where you make sure they stay in line by reprimanding them when they do wrong. So the biggest thing too is I love this one. Prolonging a stop. The worst thing you could ever do is ask for a supervisor or tell them it's okay to run the dog. Because that then allows them to extend the stop. Because Rodriguez, even when the stop begins lawfully, prolonging it beyond the time to handle the original mission, which is a traffic ticket, to fish for a crime, like waiting for a canine or waiting for a supervisor, requires independent, reasonable suspicion. No suspicion, no prolonged seizure is unlawful. Well, a prolonged seizure is unlawful. Never ask for a supervisor. Never allow a canine. Always deny the canine. Why? Because they have 15 minutes from the time they hit them lights, boop, 15 minutes. We have 45. Attempt to try it. Because whether you write the ticket or not, if I'm sitting there for 45 minutes, we going to have another conversation. Because just like I told you, you don't want me spanking your kids, don't have them at my house. And if you're going to interrupt my day, I'm going to interrupt your life. I'm with the Chicago way. Send one of mine to the hospital, I send one of yours to the morgue. An eye for an eye, we both lose our sight, but I'm willing to lose it to take yours. Fool with a purpose. That's because, again, I actually told a young man in Louisiana, I will move to Louisiana just to sue him. A fool with a purpose. And doing this is the whole understanding that they've got a time limit. Why? Because their job has to match the thing that they're doing. If they don't know it, which I know they don't, I don't care and I don't interrupt my enemies when they're doing destruction to themselves. So, why does submission matter? If the officer merely yells stop and you do not submit, there is no seizure until contact. Remember that. Their orders aren't lawful until. In Torres v. Madrid, 2021, clarifies application of physical force with the intent to restrain is a seizure if you get away. If they're attempting to restrain you and then you get away from them, then it's a seizure. But it is not a seizure if you do not attempt to get away. Always understand that. Again, the fine line in law, the context matters. Which is why if you're charged with certain aspects of a crime, or you're charged with, let's say, obstruction, and they say, because my favorite one is, he was resisting without violence. Well, the whole point of resisting is to resist. That's like I was lifting weights with no weights. I was breathing with no breath. Like, it requires some resistance to resist. There's a requirement, there's a pretext of what's needed in the statement. Resisting without violence is not resisting. That's actually submitting, complying, all the things that they like to use, because again, no one challenges it. And then even with the coercive setting, the encounters in confined spaces can become seizures if a reasonable person don't feel free to leave or end the encounter. Consent obtained during an unlawful seizure is tainted. And that's, again, Florida v. Roya, because you do not have to participate in their investigation. Always understand that. That's why you have the right to remain silent. You have the right to privacy. You have a right to everything that I tell you about. And this Constitution has written because it's a book of restrictions for them, not you. Because they can't give you something, nor can they take it away because it's not theirs to give or take. Now, the bottom line is a show of authority stop without reasonable suspicion of a crime is unreasonable. Evidence and statements are able to be suppressed as the fruit of the poisonous tree unless the government proves the evidence was inevitable discovery or from an independent source, which will be Utah v. Strife, which I did a video on, which can be distinguished, which can be distinguished aggressively. Now, outside of court defense, what do you do in the moment? Now, again, I understand this is literally, I'm giving you options if you just have to talk. If you just cannot be quiet, it's not in your spirit to just say, no, I'm not going to do it. Here's what you can do. Control your words and don't escalate. Keep your hands visible. Bye-bye. Right? Because in your car, here's what I do. I take away all their excuses. I'll put my hands on the door, on the outside. You know, I got some big mitts. I can put them on the door, not really a big deal. Turn the car off, put my windows down. Now, I never turn the interior lights on purpose. It's one of those which I'm not going to aid them in their quest to do BS. However, I'm also not going to attempt to make them uncomfortable because, one, 6'4", 300 pounds. I have a very aggressive demeanor, especially when you're aggravating the piss out of me. And then 3, I'm one of those people where I will start digging in you because, no diddy, because whenever you're putting me in a spot, my aggression, because again, my brother used to always make me laugh when I would get like this. My aggression then makes me smarter. Because just like Mike Tyson, when you get hit, everybody has a plan until you get hit in the mouth. Then you see who they are. I have a plan, generally to stay calm until I hear something stupid. The second I hear something stupid, I become uberly aggressive, verbally. Because just like I had a friend of mine, he's a police officer. And he asked me, have I ever resisted? I told him no. He said, why? I said, because y'all are too dumb to do the shit right, and I'll beat y'all in court. And I said, and 2, I'm too big and my facial expressions are too mean for what you to write in that police report not to be true. You can say anything and everybody will believe everything that you say. So instead of fighting that, I'd rather go ahead and let you bury yourself and keep my mouth closed. Because I'm going to get that camera. And if you don't have it, you got to explain why you don't have it. And he just looked at me. I was like, dude, I said, I'm a monster with this. I said, if you don't talk to me, I don't talk to you. It's literally that simple. I said, but if you ever come to me, just know I'm getting in the cuffs. I'm getting bonded out. And then I'm coming for you. I'll be a modern day Freddy Krueger. 1, 2, Richard's coming for you. 3, 4, you better lock your door. 5, 6, wear a crucifix. 7, 8, You better stay up late studying, because I'm coming. 9, 10, you'll never sleep again, because I'm going to take everything you believe you love. And I mean that with every ounce of my being. Because as long as you're not on my radar and you don't have my attention, your life should be smooth. Because the second the second you have my attention, you have all of my attention. And I'm not one of these people that just say, "Oh, I'm gonna sue you." No, I'm coming. I'm coming for your livelihood. I'm coming for everything you have. I'm coming for your spouse's paychecks. I'm coming for your children's paychecks. I'm coming for everybody that know you. I'm coming for everybody that look like you. And I hope they're adults. Because I'm seizing everything I possibly can because you decided to talk to me. I'm going straight. I don't know if you remember Eagle Eye, or I think that's what it's called, with Will Smith. And he said, "Did you just blow up the building?" He said, "Yeah, because you made a phone call." I'm going after you because you talked to me. It doesn't take a lot. Just leave me alone. But these are the reasons why I do this. Because I want you to understand there's a path to this, but it becomes your life, which is why you hire someone else. You pay for your guidance, whatever it is. But this is the thing. You have to know what it is that they can and can't do, and because they don't. And you must correct behavior when it's addressing you. And you don't have to be the monster I am. I get it. I'm good with mine. I've actually made friends with mine. We have an agreement. But as long as I'm left alone, you never have to worry about me. Just the Burlington Institute, my day, I went straight off because I was like, I can't ask them to do it if I'm not going to. Even if it was simple, which it was, and it was addressed immediately, I still went damn near to the max just because. Because at the end of the day, I don't care what they do with this little girl. I don't care. And that's part of the problem. But at the same time, I want to make sure that I can go get my seaweed without issue. Same way if I'm in a car, if I'm in a truck, if I'm on a plane or a train, I don't want to be aggravated. Because even with me, if I'm flying, soon as I get on the plane, I wear noise canceling headphones. I'm sitting in my seat, listening to my music, and I'm going to sleep. Ain't no need for you talking to me. I don't want to be bothered. We're not friends, we're not buddies. We good. Leave me alone. I actually had one I don't even know what you call, flight attendant, stewardess, I don't know. Anyway, she tapped me like 4 or 5 times, and I took my headphones off, and I asked her, I said, I hate to be an asshole, but you walked by here 3 times and looked each other in the face. I saw you had the tray. I said, are you legally required to ask me? Or when you asked the question and I didn't respond, what did you think was coming? She was like, oh, I was just wanting to make sure. I was like, again, didn't even answer my question, but I get it. Thank you. I don't want anything. I just want to get the hell off this plane after he lands it safely. That's it. Get to my destination. Don't want to be bothered. Don't care about the what do you call it? The captain's instructions. Because I know they're to get in the seat, and if something happened, grab my mask, put it on me before I help anybody else. I understand these concepts. Now, but at the end of the day, it's also making sure that they don't have a reason to escalate anything dealing with me. But now again, going into the context, let me get back on point. if you're one of those people that just have to talk for whatever reason, you can ask often, "Am I free to leave?" Most of them are assholes. Well, no, you're not free to leave. You are seized, and next line matters. If they say, "Oh yeah, you're free to leave," then leave, because you don't want that bad energy around you anyway. Because again, even the day whenever I went and handled some business, I left the house because I didn't want that energy of what happened at Burlington's in my house. My house is my place of peace. So if you got that bad energy, don't leave it there. Just take it with you. Take it somewhere else that can be depleted, not in your house. Keep your spaces clean. And even if you want to go into the point of being seized, invoke clearly. Due to the Fifth Amendment and the advice of counsel, I choose not to answer this or any further questions. I do not consent to any searches or any further seizures. This now covers your car, covers your person, covers your phone, covers your bags. Here's another tee-hee. They'll ask you, "Do you mind searching?" Or they'll use, "Well, I have to pat you down." No. Patting me down is a illegal search. I do not consent to searches. "Oh, no, it's just a pat down." So you don't understand Terryville, Ohio. A pat down is a frisk. And a frisk is a pat down. It's the same thing. You must articulate why you touching me. You must point to the dangerous area. When you're asking me out the vehicle, you must illustrate what was the ongoing danger of me staying in my conveyance. Because that's the only reason you can ask me out. These are things that they just do out of habit. Just like with Blake Simmons. Officer Johnson says he does this all the time, which means he makes illegal stops for a pretext of searching someone's car. And when they don't do it, he holds them beyond the time of the stop, just like he did. Because again, he stopped him 15 minutes on the nose. He handed him a citation. They were there for another 20 minutes. Why? Because he had the dog with the claiming, "Oh, he had a hit." Didn't find anything. Then he went to the trunk and not only opened his bag, he went and opened his bag, took his gun case out, opened the gun case, took the gun out, and, well, hold on. That's a whole lot of extra stuff without a warrant and no consent. Would that be why he left Frisco and went to another police department? This is why I keep bringing his name up. Because if you're in Texas and you're stopped by Blake Simmons, challenge it. Because Blake Simmons is a bad police officer. And anybody that keeps hiring him should pay the price because they know what he is. And just imagine, I've said his name at least 20, 25 times. Why hasn't he done anything? Because he knows I will then pull out the proof I have. I will then, because they didn't know originally I had the video. But the context of it is the challenging of everything. Making sure they're doing what they're supposed to do. You don't consent to anything. You do not accept anything except lawfulness. Do not consent because you feel you must. Because under Drayton and Bostic, consent during coercion isn't real consent. Your clear refusal protects suppression later. And that's under Royer. Because again, all three of them come right together. Because even the coercion, that voids the consent. And here's the next part of it. Let's say you do consent. You can withdraw consent at any time because it's yours. They can't just do it unilaterally because You are the master. Notice how I keep bringing that up. You have the power. If they choose to ignore you, because I actually heard a cop when the young lady refused it or withdrew her, said, well, you're not controlling the stop. I said, uh-oh. And I told him, I said, you better hope she don't call me. And so when the cop comes over talking to me, I said, you do realize when she told you not to, she withdrew her consent to search, and you kept searching? I said, you then violated law because the search became illegal. He goes, but no, we were searching already. I said that she can withdraw consent at any time. She did, and you continued. He's like, well, we didn't find anything. I said, because an legal act can't be preceded by an illegal one. Again, when you went back into the car, you performed an illegal act. And I said again, if she ever calls me, I'm going to take your badge. I'm going to post. And here I love it because I want to say, was it 2020? 2019? I did a radio show. I actually have it posted. After I did that, I did a speaking engagement at some type of legal conference here in El Paso. And during that, I met the guy at the time who was running Post. Last name is Campos. He used to be a police. He was like the police chief, I want to say, of El Paso County. And he's gave me his number. Hey, appreciate that. Da 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 da. And I've actually called him. Like, who's running Post now? Oh, here's the number. Call him now. I have a direct line to Post now. Because when I tell you I'm going to call the person who actually runs it, breadcrumbs. It's all about laying the foundation. So, a lot of times you think that certain things are done just to be out, and then you get frustrated because you don't see anything grow from it. Does not mean it's not working. So always understand that. Because what you're doing is creating a record and you're preserving it. Just like if you're making sure if a police officer is lawfully in your jurisdiction, record openly. If you're riding around and you don't have a dash camera, shame on you. Because I talked about this 5-6 years ago. And even Walmart's selling them now for like $30. Get a dash camera. You need one. And for your own mutual safety, you're recording. Use that dumbass line. Because 76% of videos never get seen when they're recorded by police officers. Let that sink in. 3/4 of videos never get seen. 3 out of every 4 videos that a police officer records never get seen. Make sure you're capturing names, badge numbers, unit, location, time, witnesses, camera angles, and whether ID was held. You want to make sure you have everything, because even if you have to go back to the businesses, figure out where you're at, figure out cross streets. And I actually had one where I had to go back because I got stopped at night. I went back to the area the next day. And I was like, oh, wow. Because in the light, it looks very different. So then I started pointing out where the police officer said he was at. And I was like, oh, he could not have seen what he said he saw. And I politely went after that. You understand what I'm saying? And the whole point was, he actually, once I filed, I want to say it was less than 3 weeks. Once I filed, this man disappeared. He just completely left. But this was also Georgia, not Texas. So, anyway, after the encounter, after your release or arrest, build your record. Put together your breadcrumbs. Write memos to yourself. What was said, tone, commands, lights, numbers of officers. Now, the reason why you want the number of officers is because whether you're doing it or you're having counsel or a defense attorney do it. This is important for your detailed discovery because you're going to request Giglio information. Why? Because you're going to put police officer character on trial. Give you an example. Because they generally, if there's a bad officer in that bunch, what they're not going to do is give you all of the officers there. Case in point, whenever we actually did the request for Blake Simmons, we literally had to go back to the video because they were attempting to tell us there was only 2 officers on scene. And we had, not only did we have times because of the video we had times, officers' names, and location. So we just politely put in GPS coordinate. Okay, cool. What GPS? Where was it? What cars was at this? What police vehicles were at this GPS coordinate at this time? Who was in it? We ended up getting all 5 officers. Why? Because one of the officers was a bad officer. So they didn't want any of them being on scene. And then we found out that 2 of them didn't even write reports. Why? Bad officers. If we put the bad officers on the stand, their credibility is trash. It takes away from the prosecution's ability to prosecute without law. So you make sure you keep records of all of that. You do your public records request if you're not arrested. Or, again, discovery, you're going to do the request for body cams, dash cams, and the like. Right? You're going to do... I hate doing this. You want to write a letter, and it's almost to the effect of an affidavit. But for me, if you write it, it's to have it available. It is not to submit. Because you want to make sure you remember what happened at that time in your best recollection. And always make sure if you are injured, you take photos and you go get medical attention. And after you get medical attention, you go get your reports. Why? Because again, breadcrumbs. You're moving those pawns. You're setting up not for your original trial, you're setting up for your lawsuit. Always understand that. And you're going to make sure you have any witnesses that can be favorable for you at an available readiness. Now, that's not as important, but you can. Doesn't hurt. And now, here's the thing too. What not to do. Don't argue at the roadside. Because what's funny is they'll give you all this BS. Remember, it's officer discretion if they're going to arrest you or not. And 90% of the time, you can't talk yourself out of it because they're actually pushing it for quotas, not for legal reasons. Don't worry about explaining away facts. Anything you say becomes evidence. Your best friend is silence after invocation. Due to the Fifth Amendment and the advice of counsel, I choose not to answer this or any further questions. I do not consent to any searches nor seizures. And if at all possible, do not run. Because you can always beat them in court. Now, there are remedies if you do run. However, try not to. That's one thing I can say. Now, one of the things that you can do, if you're a passenger, you can challenge standing Why? Because you were just there and you were seized. While the owner and passengers are distinctly narrowed during the traffic stop, the challenge is valid. But again, it has to be done correctly. You can suppress. Once you withdraw consent, they no longer have consent to keep going through and doing all this extra stuff. And you can even, what they call, identify moments from the command of hands on the hood, pulling over to the lights, halting on the sidewalk, them flanking out. These are all those things that I just spoke about that you can actually document. Hell, you can actually document them after the fact when you get the video. And or if you have video on your own, you can actually timestamp the submission and when the commands were made and what they did afterwards. Because it's not what they say, it's what they do. And it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. But again, putting these things together is what allows you to be better at what you're doing. Make sure you understand the number of officers, the commands, the positions, the retention of the ID, the blocking your movement, putting the flashlight in your eyes. All these are illegal, and all these are seizure tactics, which are illegal. And was there actual reasonable suspicion of a crime when this action was taking place? And they'll use stock language. High crime area, not illegal. Furtive movement, the fuck is that? Nervousness, cite Brown v. Texas and Terry's demand for specificity and articulable facts. Because even, again, I spoke again about being stopped in Pittsburgh. At the time I was going to see a young lady I nicknamed Chocolate. Well, while I was waiting on her to get home, I was stopped. And the officer used, well, you're in a high crime area. Now, if anybody knows SWATs or Southwest Atlanta, what was that, Metropolitan Boulevard? And I asked, I said, isn't that this entire zip code? And the officer just looked at me. I said, if that's the pretext for your stop, y'all getting ready to hand me a bunch of money. And he said, well, what are you going to say? I'm actually waiting for my girl to get over here. She lives up the block, so I'm not sitting still because I do know where I'm at. He goes, okay, well, you know, it just looks suspicious. I said, I don't care how it looks. Still not sitting still, just sitting out here because I know where I'm at. They don't know who I am until they shoot me in the head and shit. So, again, understanding they still couldn't stop me. They did stop me, and then they rolled off once I said what I said. But again, it goes back to understanding what they can and can't do. Because Wren does not save a stop without an objective violation. They must tell you what they were stopping you for, and it must have some type of sense to it. It cannot be making nonsensical stops and then offering commands that you must follow. It becomes a show of authority stop, which is illegal. Because even the Hein rebuttal, mistakes of law must be objectively reasonable. Use statute text, case law, and training materials to show the mistake wasn't reasonable, because that's going through the clearly established. Because again, if it's in their code to do certain things and they didn't do it, they are then liable for it. Glover rebuttal. Officer has contrary facts. The driver, obviously not the owner, sex, age, or insignificant basis to rely on owner is driver, which again comes back marry something. And then you see a 6'4" black dude, and now all of a sudden it's I wasn't sure. I don't feel safe. Why? Understand, 15 minutes is on your stop. Do not ask for a supervisor. Do not ask for a canine, because that allows them to extend the stop. I do not consent to any searches or seizures, and due to the Fifth Amendment protections and the advice of counsel, I choose not to answer this or any other questions. And then shut up, because they got 15 minutes to investigate. Now, even if the initial stop was valid, The extension for the dogs, they must have a reasonable suspicion that there are drugs and contraband within the car. If not, it is an illegal search. It is an illegal extension. And even when you're talking about consent, it can be withdrawn at any time, even if you do give it. So don't fall for that either. Now, even when your unwarned custodial statements can be suppressed, because even warned statements may be fruits of an unlawful seizure, and that's Wong's son. Contraband, weapons, breath, urine tests, cell phone contents, all suppressed if fruit of the poisonous tree. Now, there's a plethora of things that you can do afterwards beyond the suppression and the dismissals and things of that nature. And generally, these are going to go into the punitive damages against individual officers for recklessness, evil intent, and punitive damages generally can't be won against municipalities. However, other damages can be, because your remedies lie in federal court most of the time, more often not than in state court. So always do that. Now, even when you have a bad officer, you can actually get injunctive relief based on their history. This is, again, why you're setting up with the Giglio information. You're doing things that's most favorable and advantageous to yourself. And there's even a use of force, Frank's hearing, and even with the trial strategies, you have an opportunity to not only suppress certain things, you can now use it for evidence gathering, just as they did with you. Now, the difference between freedom and a record is often decided in the first 60 seconds. Between a question and a command, between confidence and panic, between a lawful request and an unlawful order, the Supreme Court gave us bright stars to navigate by: Terry for suspicion, Mendenhall for freedom to leave, Hiding for submission, Rodriguez for duration, Breland for passenger rights, Royer for consent tainted, Hine and Glover for the edge cases, and Torres for force. Put them to work. That's why I did separate videos on all of these cases, because they are the ones that are the patterns to put together. Because again, while I'm doing these videos, you're starting to notice that a lot of these now, they work in concert with one another. Because while they're doing that, they're strengthening you. Because out there, your job is simple. As if you're free to go, decline consent, and invoke silence, and then remain silent. Make sure you ask for counsel, and you keep a record of what's going on, even if it's mental. And the second you get a way to actually write it down, put it in the paper, make sure you do that. Does not mean you need to turn it in, but it is something that you need to have that you can reference whenever you're going and you're looking for certain aspects of it. And then in the court, that's where you do the heavy lifting. Time for the stop, dissect the reports, police, scene, even the calls from 911, even calls from dispatch. Strip away all the stock language and suppress the fruits of the poisonous tree. If your rights were taken by a show of authority stop instead of a show of facts, we don't beg for fairness. We don't operate from a place of fear. We move forward because we're not asking for respect. We're demanding it. Suppress, dismiss, and go where it is warranted, even if that means completely going to the deep end and making sure everything that you're doing is not only front and center, but everything that they've ever done is the same front and center. You're not powerless against the red and blue lights. The Constitution is not a museum piece. It's a tool. Use it like one and become a monster in court. Or you take one to court. I'm Supreme Decisions. This is my 2 cents. Spend it how you like. And don't forget to support the channel. Don't forget to hit the super chats. And if you need to contact me, my email is in the description, as well as if you need a consultation. It is also hit the link in the description. And now I'm about to take my ass back to sleep. So, see you guys mañana.